I am Alex Mogilevsky. I am working on Internet Explorer. I'm going to start the session on time because I see there is a lot of interest already, and we will have time for questions. There is a couple of things I want to say before I start. When you want to ask a question, please use one of the microphones. Because this is being filmed. And also, we have how many water bottles with IE8 on them? 24. So the first 24 people who ask good questions, and I get to say if it is a good question, get water bottles right here. Okay. I am working with Internet Explorer for a while. I started in almost exactly 10 years ago on the last weeks of IE5, which is the definition of Quirks mode as of today. Over these 10 years, I've been working on this team for about 50% of the time. The project had long and interesting history, which I'm not going to go into all details, but the really most exciting part of this history is happening right now. We are building a brand new layout engine there that is built from scratch to be as good as humanly possible in implementing the most demanded standards. And I'm going to talk a little bit on how we've been doing that. Saloni is not here. She did build this presentation, however. I want to give her credit. So a virtual Saloni is right here, and she will also answer questions because I'm going to give my and her email at the end of the presentation. You can send us mail and get into even more details for what I'm not covering today. Before, at this point of presentation, I'm supposed to talk about what I'm going to be talking about. Before I do that, I'm interested in like what you want to hear about. Not that it's going to change the presentation anyway. But I like to see who are here because they want to generally know what's up with IE8. Who is here because they want to know all the gory details on what's inside a layout engine, even though some of that information is totally in the black box and there's no way for you to practically apply it. Awesome. So this last thing is what I am actually going to be talking about. And once in a while, I'm going to say a little bit of what's happening with the project, like what we think we're going to be doing in the past, in the future, and maybe not all of the gory details are going to be totally useless and not practical. Maybe you'll learn how to write a layout engine if you need to write one. Or at the very least, you'll be able to explain to your coworkers what exactly has layout feature means, like why it was there, why it was good, and why it was created, and how do you detect when you see one. I'm going to start with a little demo that kind of shows the difference between layout engines, and it's going to give some hint on like why really we would want to build one. This is not the demo. This is the demo. So here's a page. I could just pick up the SE2 test and show how cool and cute it is when it works, and how horrible, broken it when it doesn't. But that's really just yellow and red squares, and that doesn't really give you an idea of what is different. Here is a more or less realistic page. It has a few paragraphs of text. It has a float. It has some chapter numbers. This is currently working in IE8 mode, which is what my developer toolbar is showing to me. And I love developer toolbar. I use it so much for debugging and finding out what's going on with a web page. And by the way, you can turn it off and on by clicking F12, which is a really quick way to get to change the mode on a page. With the toolbar, I can go and see what it would be like if it was A7. In A7, it looks a little different. Chapter headings are gone because that was generated content. The text doesn't flow around the float because this is the has layout feature. I'll keep calling this feature. The corners are on top of content because it's a different Z order. So things are not really what you would expect. I can also go and put it in quirks mode, which will look really totally different. But actually, what you see in quirks mode is OK. Even though it looks very different from that first page that we looked at, quirks mode is something that is really well defined. Quirks mode is what browsers were before CSS came by. It had different behavior. It has a very specific behavior. Every browser supports it now. And I could even take my standards hat back and say, quirks mode is the standard. If you want a page that goes everywhere, quirks mode is the way to go. But it's it's not the future, it's the past. What happens in quirks mode stays in quirks mode. I just came up with this today. To get somewhere with the past, which is now a brief history of standards, we need to come up with a really, really good, well-defined way that is also not ridiculously complicated to implement, that we can build future features on, and that's what the current position of standards are. So the previous page where we had IE7 kind of trying to render in, doing its best shot on standards, but not really being standards, that is a problem. And to get through that problem, we are creating a new system that will be doing really much better there. Here's a way to look at browsers and standards as an analogy of something from real life. Let's say telephones. They used to be a device that is quite simple. You make a phone. It is what it is. Now some new ways to do things coming by, and if you are a maker of a telephone and you want to get to this new world, you can maybe build something that is still a telephone and gets to do some of these new things. You get the idea. And I'm not even talking about what we want today from a telephone. It's totally a different thing. But the point here is sometimes we need to bring new technology to get to meet new demands. And that's pretty much what we've done for IE8. When we look at this picture, we can find quite a lot of interesting questions to ask, and we do get these questions asked. And I'm going to ask a couple of the questions to myself and answer them, so I could explain at which point there is a new actually major piece of technology there, not just a set of bugs fixed, and also where it's going to be going forward. So the first question is, do you really need a different mode? Can't you just fix bugs? why not just do what we did? We actually did that in A7. Like we don't have an A6 mode and A7 mode. A7 is different from A6 in a set of bugs or differences that were fixed from A6. And actually that kind of worked, but it also created a number of problems because there are websites that rely on A6 behavior and is different from A7. And I've got a lot of quite negative feedback. Can't you people just stop breaking things? Can't you just either be standards or not be standards? And that's exactly right. You don't want yet another set of bugs to test with. You want like as little as possible different things to test with. So we don't want to be anywhere in the middle. If we are getting into standards, we are implementing the standards exactly fully compliant as the standards is. But we can't remove A7 mode because it exists. And the whole existence of quirks mode in this page, which is totally accepted by everybody, is a great reason to not remove a mode that is different from the current. The next question is, what happens in the next version? Now we have 3 layout engines, and in the next version you're going to have 4 layout engines, and then every time you ship a browser, you're going to have yet another engine there. What is going to do to your memory? How is it going to ever work on a mobile? That sounds like totally horrible, not scalable sequence if you first look at it. The reality is that there isn't currently in this picture there is not 3 layout engines. You can see that like one of the rectangles have a little shade under it, and another doesn't, and it has the subtle olive-colored border with rounded corners. That signifies the difference, the boundary between different engines. i7 engine and quirks mode engine, that's one engine, that's one technology that was built a while ago. i7 mode, that's as far as it goes. And the next engine is built so it can handle a lot of different kinds of content that is going far into the future, so that we can add a lot of new functionality staying within that one engine. It's even possible that someday in the future it will also be compatible back enough to deal with quirks mode, so it can be a single engine there. So now you don't expect that your memory will grow and grow and grow and grow every time you add another version and another engine there. The last question I wanted to ask to myself right here is how expensive it is to support multiple versions in one engine. And that is something it's not specific to Explorer at all. When you ship multiple versions of software, sometimes it's okay to not support any previous content. In things that deal with documents, it's kind of important. And I'm always saying that I am a former Word developer. I worked on Microsoft Word for a couple of versions. And Microsoft Word is now in version 14. It still opens all of the documents back to Word 1. And if it doesn't, it is a bug that Word goes and fixes. And it is extremely specific about fixing, about keeping precisely the same layout. If it's slightly different, a 100-page document can become 200-page document, and the whole document is going to become unusable because your width of one space is going to be slightly not the same. How expensive is it for Volt developers? I remember all kinds of problems that I would have to deal with as a Word developer. But having an if statement around a bug fix was never really something that would slow me down. So this is kind of the landscape of where the new layout engine comes in. Why it is there. The fine detail of this picture is actually slightly more complicated. The understanding of what version we are in goes through the whole system. The parser is somewhat different from IE7 when you're in IE8. Displays different. Object model is more standards, like get element by ID works differently in different modes. So it can be compatible in old mode. It can be standard in the new mode. I will not go into much detail about that. I'm going to talk about layout engines. This is a very, again, high-level view of what happens in the IE7 layout engine. This was built, the whole concept of how it works was built in somewhere about 10 to 12 years ago for the web as it was now. And the approach to layout is connecting elements with their display representation using layout code that is specific to elements. So basically, an imaged element knows how to figure out its size. It knows how to render it. And there is an image-specific code there. A table knows how to do these same things. And it is a kind of bottom-up approach to layout, where everybody is responsible for what they're doing. And the whole system kind of comes together because at every level there is element-specific code. There is nothing wrong with this approach. On simple systems where all components are independent, this is precisely what you're supposed to do, and there are books written about it. The system as complicated as CSS layout is today, when you add floats and margin collapsing and even tables which were already there in Quirks mode, make it much harder than that. And you really, every time anything changes on your page, you can potentially analyze the whole document. It doesn't get you much advantage of doing a bottom-up layout, but mixing bottom-up and top to bottom gets to very complicated loops and just difficult. What we are doing in IE8 layout is, and by the way, this is really top secret. You can't really tell anybody about this. This is all, like, everything that is in the box is kind of it's you can't really see it. I'm going to show you how this stuff works. But all of the names that are there, like, we made it up for this presentation. So if you see us talk about page layout component, there is no really a name internally for it. Not that, like, we are trying to hide it. It's just there isn't a name, because we never ever talk about the details of how really things happen inside the layout engine. So even terminology is kind of non-existent. So if ever again we talk about this, you might see the same pictures with totally different names. So you have the right to be confused there. So what we've done differently in this version, the first thing that we've done is we took advantage of document tree already being separated from display tree. let's just step back to the previous picture. We already see that there is a markup tree that is on one side of layout. And that tree exactly represents what object model is. That's super important for object model. When we parse things and then a script goes and applies some changes, they want to see document tree exactly precisely as if it was in markup. Display tree, however, is a tree of objects on screen which is optimized for things like rendering, z-order, heat testing, and it can have different shape, can have different one-to-one, one-to-many relationship to objects. It doesn't have to be a separate tree, but we've built it like that in IE5 and very happy about it, that it does allow separation of logic between things. Like if something has a scroll bar that is a display tree feature, and anything can have a scroll bar, an image can have a scroll bar, a table can have a scroll bar. That code doesn't need to be rewritten many times. So we're quite happy with this separation. Now we can take pretty much the same markup tree, the same display tree, and put an entirely different layout engine in between them. I'm sorry I have to switch back, but really something that I had to show there, and I must. This round thing in the middle, this is the layout. So you're familiar with the concept of has layout, right? You've heard from your friends, web developers, and how horrible it is that there is a has layout on in Internet Explorer, which nobody else does, that comes to really, really nasty layout problems. So here it is. Here, this yellow circle is the has layout. The concept of has layout as well, the concept of layout as an object that does everything layout related to an element, that was the core concept of building this top-to-bottom, bottom-to-top layout system. And the unwanted times when it is being triggered in the old layout, it was a decision that forked between the old HTML layout and the new CSS layout. The decision is if you apply a property to something that doesn't apply there, but it could apply there if it had some other properties, what do you do? For example, if you apply a height to a line of text, the height property has no effect on text. It would have an effect on text if that piece of text was a block. If it was a table or a float or position, then the height would apply. So in pre-CSS world, height or width or other block properties would force the element to become block. Then the element becomes a block, it gets a layout, and the height can be handled, and everything works. In CSS world, if the property doesn't apply, it just doesn't apply. It's just getting ignored. And there is no right or wrong in that. It's just the system was built before the new standard came by, and that has layout feature stays there, and now considered usually has layout bug. And in the old system, it was kind of hard to get rid of it because there is the layout object. It is there. It's kind of it's hard to hide it. Now in the new world, we have removed that single layout, that low-level layout object that connects any elements with their display. But instead, there is a holistic view. There's a whole page, and the whole page layout is the only way to lay out the page. We get from element tree. We make a single request to a page layout component to format the document, and it creates a page object that represents the whole page. And from that, we build a display tree. Now, it is totally irrelevant what kind of relationships between, in terms of one-to-many were there between elements and display objects. It all gets represented in a single page. It creates entirely different performance challenges. It is for correctness. It's kind of when we build things bottom up. We first solve a simple problem, and then we figure out what to do with complicated problem. This goes totally the opposite direction. We first solve the absolutely most horrible, complicated problem that nobody will probably usually discover. But once that most complicated problem is solved, all of the simple problems are always also solved. But then we need to make this performance faster, because complicated problem is harder to solve. So there are different challenges there. Now to illustrate a little bit on what is happening in the process of doing layout calculations, I'll take a fairly simple page and go over what's happening there. In this page, there are only two elements that are interesting anyway. There's a div that's a float. That's our div1, and there's a div2 that is a table cell. This table cell is a feature that is one of the most difficult in CSS2, because you can make any element look like anything. And the defined behavior for this for something that is a table cell is that by setting it on some element, it becomes a table cell, and also it creates a table around itself as if it was there. So the definition is that it has to create an anonymous table object which has an anonymous table row, and then it has a table cell. So it kind of generates an imaginary table around it. So to get from this to actually doing layout, we have to have some way to produce that imaginary table. And for doing that, we have a subsystem that we call a layout content model, which gets from this element tree, which is exactly what you would expect. That's exactly what the markup says, and that never changes. It gets to layout element tree, which looks very different. And this tree is built by precisely what CSS spec describes. And CSS spec actually, as of today, CSS 2.1 spec is very, very specific in how content should be handled and how every element becomes a block. It doesn't have a definition of a block, but that's okay. It doesn't prevent the correctness of being or not being a block being precisely defined. So in the outer div, there are two blocks. One of them is a piece of text that becomes an anonymous text block. Another is a table which is wrapped in a table container, and there are several levels of generated table pieces, table elements. And then there is actually text inside of that. Now, when this gets handled by page layout component, it is working in an interface which has a very well specified separation of of logic from layout logic from content. There is a reason for that. This component is a piece of code that we share with Microsoft Office. It is the same layout engine that is in Word or will be in the future version of Word. So it is a way that we are trying to do the best we can in standards implementation, and then we will move this into different pieces of code that need that, so they're all equally standard. There is a certain price to pay for that, because there is a separation of logic. There are more interfaces to deal with. It actually may have a more memory footprint because there is a separated logic with a component. But there is also big advantage that there is a pure logic piece of code that can be moved from one project to another. And we already had a good experience by doing that with other pieces of code. So in this sequence of processing this markup, the page layout component, we are going to ask it just one question. We are going to ask create a page. It will going to start this process. It will at some point ask, okay, give me the next element. We give it the next element. It produces something that represents that element in the page. It comes back to ask more questions about it. It asks for it fetches its content. It creates page elements, and eventually we will have built a page that we can now process and render on screen. Now, just to show what kind of tools we are using when we are debugging through the code and look at people's web pages. I've taken this same page that we just looked at, and I used the two dump utilities that we have built in. This is not available to you. This is only what we use internally, at least at this point. One is a dump of layout elements that are in layout tree. So you can see that although we only had a couple of elements in a markup, we have containers, and containers, which are produced because this is the processing model that CSS requires. And the other one is a display tree, which has display elements with all of their properties that are necessary for doing display, and it has they all have sizes and coordinates which only make sense to have on display. You can notice, by the way, that some of the numbers here are really big. There are dimensions of hundreds of thousands of units. This is a manifestation of layout being done in units that are different from display pixels. This is also different in the new platform. It doesn't have much to do with having a new engine. Quirks mode also happens in high resolution. But it is an important feature for a couple of reasons. It does make the zoom experience much more usable. Like in this case, this page would have quite a different layout in actual A7. not in A7 mode in A8, but in actual A7, these things don't fit because I built this page intentionally to produce sizes that are not whole pixels. 50% of something like 201 pixels can be 50 pixels or 51 pixels. And if the container is 101 and if each half is 51, they don't fit. That things fall apart, and we've seen a lot of this happening. It usually doesn't happen normally on web page because the designer would notice that. But when the web page is getting zoomed up or down, sizes become odd and things fall apart. So to make it really work, the layout engine works at a high resolution which is significantly higher than screen pixels. So a 50% of 101 can be sometimes 50 and sometimes 51. It all gets rounded up transparently when at the last possible moment when it gets on screen. Meanwhile, it was represented as a 50 and a half pixels, and then the result looks really well when it's zoomed. You can still notice sometimes a red line on the side, which is a more complicated issues that I'm not going to get into. But you can expect that the things that involve fractional size calculations will work very smoothly here. I would like to claim that we have done this first, but actually Firefox layout works exactly the same way, as far as I know. And now that I'm in other new things in layout, this is actually working this way only in IE. We had vertical text for several versions now. In this new iteration of the platform, we understand that vertical text is quite important in a lot of parts of the world. So we have built an engine that can handle any possible writing direction, of which there are 8. Actually, in any known human language that we know, there are really 6 writing directions. It can go left to right. It can go right to left. It can go vertical, where lines go from right to left, or vertical lines from left to right. If you mix all of that with right to left languages, you get 6 directions. The direction where lines go left to right and text goes left to right and the lines go bottom to top is a fairly exotic. I think like what's written on the road, like school bus, would be one example. But now, like if you get in the business to support 6 directions, we could just support 8. So we have supports for all combinations of directions, and this is being defined in CSS3 as writing directions, and we actually are working, in CSS working group to get a good definition of how everything else is supposed to behave when you have changes in direction. If you want to know more about our activity in standards, you feel free to ask or come up after the talk. Now that you have all this knowledge, there is number of ways probably you can use it other than do the same when you build the layout engine. You have a build of Windows 7, right? Yes. Good. So it has a version. It has a build of IE8 which is much newer than Beta 2 that came out in August. It does have everything that I was showing today. You can analyze web pages and see what looks different. Some of the difference that you're going to find are bugs. Some of the differences will be from pages actually expecting some other IE8 or IE6 behavior. You can put the page into a particular mode, but using a meta tag or HTTP header. You can make pages that used to not validate because all non-standard properties are not now available in validatable prefixed form. And of course, always use a proper syntax if you ever consider using conditional comments. And this, I'm going to finish my presentation a little early. This is intentional because I expect to have questions. I expect that you might know something that is not only deep, gory details of layout. Please ask, and I'll do my best to answer. This is my email and Saloni's email. You can always send us email with more questions, and we usually answer everything that we receive. Please use microphones so that it gets recorded. You were first.
Right now, as pages are download, we can see streaming layout occur. Does the new layout engine affect streaming layout at all?
Streaming layout?
As in, as pages are being downloaded.
There's no fundamental difference in how this works. This really is more of object model and parser processing. Parser parses part of the page, gives it the layout, it handles it, then incrementally does more. So it will behave exactly the same way with the new engine.
Thank you. Quick question for you. Does the new layout engine use anything dealing with the WPF rendering or layout engines?
Not at this time. It would be awesome because it would get really cool new graphics. No, without making any changes in how we draw things. We will certainly do it in some future version.
Okay, thank you.
And are you going to bring the?
If you want to come, if you have a question, come back here and grab a water bottle.
Yeah, like Pete is back there with really cool water bottles.
I was a little curious about the rationale. We were looking at the rules that you have supported for CSS3, and I was going through the website and I noticed that certain things like rounded corners and those were chosen for whatever reason to not put in there. Can you kind of discuss why you chose to leave certain rules out and what was the rationale behind the ones that you decided to include?
You're talking about IE or CSS3?
IE8 with respect to the CSS3 rules. And what's
well, this is one of the examples where we are very serious about supporting a standard completely. So CSS3 borders and backgrounds module is quite complicated. There are multiple. You can use multiple backgrounds. There is a lot of interesting things you can do with borders. There is the whole spec is being stabilized right now. It is there are still fluctuations in the spec itself. I think of all of these reasons, the spec not being complete would be the least important. It's still quite totally reasonable to support a spec as like with like dash MS proprietary prefix. But really, it is one of our things that we could have implemented multiple backgrounds or rounded borders. Doing the whole spec is more that fit in the one release where we rewrite the layout engine. We'll get to it next time. I can't make any promises for i9, but if we add one support of one feature, it will be rounded corners.
I heard you mentioned that the next version of Office would support the would have the IE8 layout engine possibly.
I can say a future version of Office is very likely to support the same features.
Okay, so in Office 2007, I know that they started using the Word rendering engine for Outlook, HTML formatted emails, and I know there were some issues involved with that in terms of like having layout and CSS support. Do you see the new a next version of Outlook supporting the IE8 rendering engine to fix some of those issues, or?
I can't really have. I don't have a specific plan for what next version of Office is going to do. For what happened with Word rendering in Outlook 2007, there was some combination of security and performance issues that made them make that choice. I know it's not perfect, and people would love to see HTML mail to render perfectly, but that's how it happened.
I'm going to ask a question about the backwards compatibility. If the IE was being used IE control mode, so we have a certain size, and we kind of manage to create a content fits in the certain size. If we upgrade to IE8, would that be, if the rendering is kind of different, would that become like our size going to have to change, or going to stay the same?
Well, if your control is binary behavior that plays in layout calculations, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a certain size. It's a fixed size.
I don't think you're going to see a particular difference. The real difference goes in box model and things that are really HTML content. If it is your control is a box, it's unlikely that you see much difference.
Yeah, I'm just worried about
well, basically, I can't think of any difference that you would say.
Yeah, if some like the last line will become hidden or whatever, would that thing's going to happen or wrap differently?
Well, the layout of everything becomes different if it may affect the result.
So it may affect the result. That's
there is nothing that we change in interfaces to extensible layout objects.
Is there any like a backwards compatibility, like flag or whatever, say keep the original layout?
There is no compatibility flag that would apply to an object. If you want to have more specific details, you can come and tell me more about it.
Can I answer this question?
Sure.
Okay. Hey, my name is Pete LePage. I'm one of the product managers on Internet Explorer. To answer your question, is there a backwards compatibility tag? Yes, there is. You can use the meta tag that Alex was talking about earlier, and that will tell Internet Explorer 8 to use the IE7 rendering engine. So if you go put that on your page today, and then IE8 ships, you don't have to worry about the changes in rendering, because IE8 will use the IE7 rendering engine.
So basically, I have to change all my existing content to add that tag.
So there's two ways you can do it. You can either add it as a meta tag at the top of each page, which is what Alex showed up on the slide. You can also add it as an HTTP header.
Oh, HTTP header.
So you can put it at the server level, and then what will happen is all pages that are sent down from that server will use the IE7 rendering engine. If you do that, and then you want, say for example you do that, and then you start writing some pages that are more standards compliant, and you want to use the IE8 rendering engine, you can actually go put the meta tag on the page and tell the page to use the 8 rendering engine. The meta tag in the page will override the HTTP header.
Okay.
Okay?
So there is a way in server
yeah,
side to change
there's absolutely
the
a way.
Okay.
So the important thing to get out of this is that there are 2 rendering engines. The 2 rendering engines that you have, you can choose which one you want to use. By default, Internet Explorer 8 will use the more standards compliant and the newer one. But if you have pages today that won't render properly because they're using some old behaviors, some things that we had bugs on or we didn't do properly, you can still maintain that same behavior.
Could I follow a little bit that?
Yes.
If it's already a static content, the HTML page on the local machine already, then it will not be covered by these two cases because the
Correct.
tag is not there.
Correct.
They don't have HTTP
Yep. If it's
header.
sitting on the local machine, it won't do that.
Oh.
There is one special case that I'll call out. If the content is coming from a domain join machine and coming from the intranet, IE will use the IE7 rendering engine.
Okay.
So your corporate intranet applications, by default, if you're domain joined, will use the IE7 rendering engine. And there is a checkbox that you can go do that. You can set that by group policy if you're an IT admin or something like that, and you need to go say, hey, I want all these pages, you can do that by group policy. If it's a local page and they're getting it through HTTP whack localhost whack file, if the machine is domain joined,
Right.
you'll grab it that way.
What about is like the file system?
Yeah, I
It's gonna be
believe that one, it does it with the IE8 rendering engine.
Okay, so that's the new with
Yep.
the new engine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Pete.
I'm not sure if you can answer this. In previous versions of IE, it would use ActiveX sometimes to render parts of the page. And the problem with that is with JavaScript, if I use the DOM and I hold on to things a little bit and then release them, I guess a memory leak would happen where I would release things in the DOM on the IE rendering side, but the ActiveX wouldn't release it. Is the new engine not using ActiveX at all to assist rendering the page so that that memory leak problem goes away?
I'm not sure what exactly the problem was with ActiveX. There is a known difficult issue of circular references where there is
that's it.
there is a relationship between garbage collection in JavaScript and reference counting inside the engine. And they when they don't know about each other, they both think that this is not free when it is actually free. We have changed that by extending garbage collection API in the JavaScript that we previously would collect that when you close a page. Now with this, we collect these circular references every time we have a garbage collection cycle. So you will see zero or very little of this issue.
So that would allow me to run like an Ajax app for 8 hours without really worrying about memory?
That's the expectation.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, you said that it will follow the standard, so I can hope that it will render the same as Firefox, all the pages, but that's just a...
Actually better, but okay.
Okay, but my real question is, did you have any test for speed, comparing to the Google Chrome, which should be the fastest?
Well, I'm not going to speak about performance. We are in the process of doing a lot of performance work. So we are going to release performance numbers when we have them. The competition is tough. It's not like sitting there doing nothing. They're also optimizing things. As far as standard support for the numbers I have, actually, I asked our testers to give me the numbers when I was coming here, but they also asking a couple of days to get them. But from all the standards coverage numbers I see, there is IE8 is more standard in CSS 2.1 than any other browser.
Hey, Alex, can I?
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I'm just going to jump in here a little bit and answer a couple of questions. One of the things that we've done with our CSS stuff, we've said we're going to be CSS 2.1 compliant, completely compliant when we ship IE8, which is a really big, important thing. But one of the complexities of that is what does complete and compliant mean? And for us, one of the things that we're doing right now is we're taking the CSS test suite that we've written internally, and we're handing that over to the W3C because currently there is no global W3C CSS test suite. So when you go look at the spec, it says to do one thing. And I'm going to quote something off the top of my head. I don't have the slide here, so please excuse me for slightly misquoting this. But from the table width algorithm chunk on setting the width of a table, it basically says This is how you should do it. But if you do something else, that's fine too. So that basically means developers who are writing browsers can write one thing, and another browser vendor can write something else, and another vendor can write something completely different. And that is all according to spec. So who's right? Is Internet Explorer right? Is Firefox right? Is Safari right? Is Chrome right? Which one is the right behavior? So what we're doing is we're taking our test suite, and so far we've taken 3,700 tests, and we're going to continue to donate tests back to the W3C. And when we donate these tests to the W3C, we're saying, hey, this is our expectation of behavior. This is what we think is right, and we're providing that to the community to provide feedback on. And we've been taking that feedback, taking that back in, adjusting our tests, and trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Because we want to make sure that when we have quotes like that from the spec, that the ambiguity is pulled out of there, so that we have a good understanding of what the right thing is. Does that answer your question?
Yes, probably. I hope I hope it will get better, because the main problem that I as a developer see, I do something in, I write CSS, and I tried in Internet Explorer and then in Firefox, and the problems.
So you will find, go play with IE8. You'll see a lot better behavior between IE8 and Firefox, IE8 and Safari or Opera or anything like that.
Yeah, thanks. Pete, for reminding that. We are very serious about getting 100 to 100% of standard. It involves defining the standard. Some of the things that Pete has mentioned are really too late to define. So there are two kinds of issues with standard. There are things that are explicitly undefined in the standard, and there are things that are defined in the standard, but there's no way to test if a browser supports that. And with all criticism that CSS working group has, and I'm part of it, I'm taking that personally, that CSS specs take years and years to become actually standards. In the last 2 years, the only thing that really is between CSS 2.1 being a formal standard. It is a test suite. It didn't, as of a year ago, it pretty much didn't exist. Microsoft added thousands of tests just this year, and as of 2 years ago, it was about a couple of hundred, and they were of questionable quality. And now we really have in the goal of CSS Charter to be a recommendation in next year.
Yeah, I think it's currently a quite critical issue that prevents using Internet Explorer for next generation user interface software, and that it cannot render to DirectX surfaces or in general textures. And my question would be, how will you address this in the future? Will you, with the upcoming DirectX 11 and Direct Draw, new GDI Plus replacement APIs, also introduce rendering to texture for Internet Explorer? And my question, is there some advanced plans for the web browser control, for example, to have abstraction of user input and update content in the output of the whole process, so that you could say, oh, I have a region that has to be updated, and I need the browser, the render engine would request me to update the texture.
I have two answers. One, it is certainly the direction we want to get to. There isn't anything particularly new in this version. Another, there are actually some tricks that people play with setting update region. If you want to know the details of what can be done there, send me mail. I'll send you some information.
Okay, thank you. Because I think it's really critical. If you look at the forums and you see people who try to integrate the Internet Explorer into games, for example, or other 3D UI, it's really complicated.
It is really difficult to do, I know. It would be great if you could.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a question about how the new engine handles dynamic content. We've had some instances where we'll have like an object in JavaScript that has a lot of different components that it'll render, and if we kind of render those things dynamically, rendering each object instance in Internet Explorer, we've noticed that it's better if we, in version 7, if we queue up all our changes and do like try to do one big sweeping inner HTML change or whatever, instead of doing like a lot of little changes. Does the new engine handle dynamic content differently? And I was just wondering, maybe you could give a brief overview of how if it does.
It does in some way. In some ways, it really there's fundamentally no difference in terms of how any engine handles dynamic content. It is if you have a number of changes that come in sequence and they don't depend on each other, it is up to the engine to optimize how many at a time it wants to process as a layout engine. For this reason, queuing up changes and do one big put in HTML, it will always work better with all engines. For incremental changes, there are two reasons that can slow things down. One, it is just not optimized for this. Another, if you interleave changes with queries, if you insert an object and you run some API, which depends on what size it is, that would be a blocking call. It will have to run layout engine at this point to get the result of the width, and use the width. And sometimes even you're not going to ask get offset width. There may be some API that uses it, you don't realize it is using a width.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Hi, my name's Adam Robin. I work on Safari and WebKit at Apple. And I wanted to say that, first of all, it's really great to see this renewed interest in interoperability. And I have two questions about the engine switching. My first question is that you mentioned that there are some differences in how IE7 renders things and how IE7 mode in IE8 renders things with respect to high-res content. And so I wanted to ask if that is undermining the strategy of having the IE7 engine around if things are actually changing on people. And the second question is, what do you see being different about the IE8 engine that will cause you not to have to freeze a version, for subsequent versions of IE?
Well, the second answer is actually very simple. There is no way we not freeze a version because we are going to at least add features. So if we add multi-column layout or rounded corners that did not exist, it has to be an IE8, IE9 mode document to render that. We are going to get back to these questions again and again. If you ship a new version, is it IE9 by default or IE8 by default? And as much as I would like to deliver my own opinion, I cannot predict where we'll end up next time. It depends a lot on how version is received now. I know that we are the only company that promotes the versioning currently, but also we are the company who have the biggest installed base. We'll see how Safari does that if you have the next version that breaks something previous, and where you go. And the first question was?
It was about differences that you mentioned between IE7 and the IE7 mode in IE8 with respect to high-res content.
Yes, we take that very, very seriously, and really I can only think of one more case where we've decided to fix a bug without versioning, because the bug was so major that if somebody ever used that property, it would be unusable. So we decided, okay, we are not going to version this fix. But really, everything that fixes goes into different mode. With high-resolution layout, the problem is not as big as it sounds, because at 100% zoom, the layout that would be different between the modes, it would also be pretty broken in the old mode. The thing that happens is you have two objects side by side that should be fitting, but they don't fit because they have some percentage siding. I usually don't like to point at specific sites. One of our favorite sites to test is arstechnica.com. It has an extremely tight layout that depends on very, very precise matching sizes of parent and child elements. And when you go zoom that, it totally falls apart unless you make these kind of calculations. So the short answer to IE7 question, we have made this choice that potentially make changes layout to make zoom experience there better, because you can't zoom IE7 page with reasonable experience unless you switch to high resolution layout.
Thanks very much.
And I would be really glad to see Safari representatives in W3C more often.
So the one thing I just want to toss in, the important part of that is that you're only going to see that if you're zoomed in on the page. So this average user who's looking at the page at 100% mode isn't going to see that. So, cool. Thanks.
Hi. I'm wondering, are there any optimizations when viewing Internet Explorer 8 through terminal services? Any thoughts about speeding that up at all?
What services? Say it again.
Oh, viewing the rendering engine through terminal services. Like, do you perform any optimizations at all?
Maybe, actually, I'm not sure. I think it would more apply to newer versions of terminal services that would optimize that. I think we have optimized that quite a lot in the past. Whatever done there still applies.
Okay, so there's no new features.
Yeah. Well, there are interesting problems with that, because HTML is by nature has very many layers in that, and IE does layered rendering, so you have you can have anything on top of anything. That kind of output is not very easy to optimize to send background separately and text separately because of all combinations. Terminal services itself actually can realize, because it is a GDI call that goes to a surface. Terminal services can be smarter by serializing that better, but there isn't much more that we can optimize at the engine level.
Yeah, I was just curious. One of the things you mentioned as part of the new layout engine, you mentioned that the new layout engine has its own parser. And I was just, first of all, curious to what depth does that extend? Are you doing completely, do you have a new tokenizer, for instance? Or is that shared with the, with the existing, do you use a shared tokenizer between the two layout engines? And
we have a brand new CSS parser, yes.
Okay, just CSS?
I believe it also sits side by side with old CSS parser.
So what about things like the DOM API, though? You also mentioned that there were a lot of changes, that it was a new implementation. Is it actually a new implementation?
Version of DOM API is a very, very interesting issue. I think we have a separate talk on that. If you look back at mixed talks from the previous year, I think the talk is there, and we describe on how we version. But the short answer is that implementation of DOM is the same. We don't have a side-by-side DOM object for every possible API. It is behavior of a small number of APIs that existed in IE7, but worked in a not standard way. Like get element by ID was case insensitive before, and it is case sensitive now. And or is it not case sensitivity? It applies to ID and name, and it doesn't apply to name anymore because it's not supposed to. So the behavior, the subtle difference in behavior depends on what mode the document is in. Also, existence of APIs depends on what mode the document is in. So new APIs that we've implemented in IE8, if the page is in IE7 mode, it truly pretends to be in IE7 mode. It does not expose the existence of API if it was not there in the past. So your page can use that to check, okay, is this in IE7 mode?
But the actual implementation of the objects in C or C++, it's going to be the same object you're talking to. If you call get element by ID, it's going to go to the same actual function.
Yes, majority of APIs is implemented by exactly the same code. C is like maybe more complicated than IE7. I would more complicated than JavaScript. I don't think I know enough to give you a definitive answer on every detail. But again, if you come by and ask me questions or send email, I will.
Sure. Thanks.
This is not a question about the rendering, but being that you have made changes to IE8, I was wondering if you've done anything with XML HTTP and how you can implement reverse Ajax or Comet really with the current implementation, because you have to wait till the complete response is received before you can actually do something with it in your JavaScript code. Have you done anything to improve that?
No. I work on layout engine. Pete.
I probably can't give you the full answer on this, but I'll give you something a little bit better. We have done a lot of work around that. We have done a lot of stuff around the cross-document and cross-domain messaging. So that may get some of the stuff, but I don't think we've completely done what you're looking for.
Oh.
So if you stop by or shoot an email, we can get you full details on that.
Okay. Thank you.
The data that I've seen still shows that there's still a lot of people using IE6. And it looks like you can go back and forth to test what the rendering looks like with IE7 and IE8 by using that developer toolbar with IE8. But what about testing IE6? How can I test that? Right now I'm using a DLL hack that lets me run IE6 and IE7 side by side, and I'm wondering how can I do that easily?
Pete wants to answer.
This is probably my favorite question to answer because it's the biggest pain in the butt to answer. Realistically, there's a huge number of people still using IE6. You know, my mom is still using IE6 because she just won't upgrade her computer, and her computer won't run IE7. There's people out there who are like that. What we suggest for people who are running and who want to test on IE6, we provide a free virtual PC image of Windows XP plus IE6, and we're going to continue to do that. Go download that and use that. It's about a 450 meg download. It's got a 4-month expiry on it because we are giving away a copy of the operating system as a virtual PC, so we have to time bomb it. The thing about it, and the reason why we tell people using those DLL hacks, using IE tools, there's a bunch of different applications out there that you can get that do that, is you end up with a Franken build, right? So you go and replace the rendering engine, but you don't replace the JavaScript engine, you don't replace the networking stack. Or say you're testing all three. So you replace the networking stack with IE6, you replace the JavaScript stack from IE7, and you put the IE8 rendering engine in. Well, now you have a Franken build that no real-world user is ever going to have. So you end up in a place where you're basically screwed. You know, you're testing stuff that doesn't exist. So if you really want to do it, what we recommend is install IE8 on your box. That way you can test IE8 and IE7 side by side just by switching the engines you're using. And then use the IE6 virtual PC. We know that it's not the ideal situation, and if we could change it, trust me, I would do it in a heartbeat. But right now, it's something we can't do. We are working as hard as we can to try and really encourage users to upgrade from 6 to 7 and 8. So we want to get people off IE6. We hear the pain. So I hope that answers your question, gives you a better idea.
Follow on for that. Okay. So I work for university, and so we see actual data from a lot of people using the university. I think it's pretty high still. So that's definitely something that would help if there's an easier way to test other than installing another virtual environment. And then the other follow-on question I have to that is I'm running Parallels Desktop for Mac and running Windows on that. And so can I install this Microsoft Virtual Test environment on top of that, and will that work?
So installing that VPC, there is a converter tool that will convert from the VHD file that we provide to Parallels. It doesn't work, unfortunately, because what happens is our licensing people have said, hey, you can't convert this to anything else other than Virtual PC, and then you convert it, and Virtual PC says, oh, hey, or Windows XP says, hey, there's been a hardware change, you need to reactivate, and of course you can't reactivate because there's no product key there. So you can't do it. What I would suggest you do is just go, find a copy of Windows, install it, build it yourself. Because the other advantage of doing that, if you're in a licensed environment, like a school or something like that, where you can just install relatively easily, you can install it. You don't have to worry about the time bomb, right? Because ours are time bombed for 120 days, meaning you have to re-download it every 120 days. The one that we have right now expires on, I think, end of December. So at the end of December, you'd have to download a new one. If you build your own, you don't have to keep doing that.
Hello. We are using, or try to use actually, a pretty sophisticated sliding windows concept to create rounded borders around blocked elements by having floating top, left, right, bottom everywhere with small background images to make the whole border. And unfortunately found out, okay, if I use the automatic floating with i6 and i7, I usually get 1 pixel offset somewhere and have the border and right next to it the rounded corner instead of exactly layouted. And the question is, will this be solved with the new rendering engine?
Actually, well, of course, yes, because we are standards compliant. A friend of mine sent me an interesting workaround for this that creates exactly the effect that you are describing. It works identically in all browsers, including IE6, by using negative offsets at some point.
Exactly, that's what we're using.
Yeah. Okay. So you figured it out.
Yeah, but it still had the pixel problem.
Yeah. Try it in IE8.
Okay. Yeah. We've been pretty overloaded with stuff, so I hadn't a chance to try it and just figured I'd ask. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Just a quick question. How does this, and all this stuff that you've talked about today, does this apply to the Windows mobile version of IE, or is that a different group altogether?
This is not in mobile yet. At some point in the future, it probably will be, but currently the newest and greatest mobile version is version 6.
So yeah, I think it's version 5. They are working on getting the next version of Windows Mobile to have a later version of IE in it, but unfortunately this stuff probably won't make it. So I think we're actually out of time if I'm correct, but before you guys go, I just want to call out a couple of things. We've got a demo booth, and we've got a whole bunch of IE experts downstairs in the big room. We'd love to have you stop by, ask questions, anything like that. If there was anything you didn't get answered, or you want to see some of the new features like the developer tools, accelerators, web slices, all the stuff that we didn't go into when people put up their hand at the beginning and said, hey, you just want to see the new features, we're showing all those things off downstairs, so we'd love to have you join us down there.